Let's be honest, there's no guidebook when it comes to relationships. So we end up having to stumble through life trying to figure things out for ourselves. What if there was a podcast that found the answers for you, that provided insight to build a successful relationship and ultimately find the companionship you've always hoped for? Welcome to the Girls Ask Guys show, where we answer the questions most people are afraid to ask when it comes to lessons in life and love. It's time to master this thing called life together with your hosts, John and Ashley.
And welcome back to the Girls Ask Guys show, where we are your guide to dating, love, life, and everything else, including marriage, which is going to be our topic for today. But this is not your ordinary little marriage episode. No, this is about child brides happening today in our country in 2021.
Yeah.
We're not talking just 17. No, we're talking as young as 13. And it's approved by the federal government.
13-year-olds. 13-year-olds are now being, I don't want to say forced, so we'll use a simpler word. 13-year-olds are being coerced into marrying perverts for citizenship. Now, if you're on the side of, well, how do you know it's not consensual? I'm going to go ahead and tell you this. 13-year-olds are not smart enough to make a decision that definite, especially when it comes to leveraging citizenship.
Right. And we're talking about, these are requests sent to CIS. And it's a loophole within the law. Now, they are trying to close the loophole, but if it's happened, it happened very quietly because there's no report on. All we know is that certain senators, I'm not really going to name them because, they're out of office now. We're looking into it, and we don't know where the buck was passed to.
It was passed nowhere.
But this has been going on for years, decades.
The fact that this exists, and you know what the thing is, and I'll be honest with you, I don't think, and it's not really a dig on America or anything, or Americans. I, number one, think most people wouldn't even believe this is going on. But number two, I would say to a certain extent that people are so distracted, and that doesn't mean like with anything major. I just mean with life in general, that nobody's ever probably stopped to think about this.
Right. Yeah, they just rubber stamped it.
Yeah. I guess the part that really bothers me is the honoring. Like, they honor what's legal in another country, when most of the time when people are coming to America, it's because they're trying to come to a new country with new laws and new boundaries and new ideas. So to re-traumatize this child by saying, yes, you do have to marry him, even if you come to this country that you were taught was the land of opportunities, is just fucked up. It's blatantly fucked up.
Right. Now, to set all of this in a motion so that everybody can understand how this whole thing happened to even begin with, we need to look at the history of where all this started. Because the revulsion over child marriage really didn't start until really the early 1900s. Because it was in the early 1900s, somewhere right around 1909, that actual laws were set in place by states for the legal age of marriage. And back then, it was right around the age of 16, and it kind of grew from there to the common understanding today of 18. There are still states like Colorado is 17 with exceptions. A few other states, it's as low as 16 with exceptions. Look at it this way. Every single state has an exception somewhere.
Right. And that's one of the things that's not as bad to me. Like the states' rights and the state saying, okay, well, 17. I would wager to say that most of those 17-year-olds aren't being hauled off and proposed by 40-year-old creeps. I think it's more along the lines of when you're young and dumb and want to get married. But when we talk about the concept of the international marriage kind of thing, that's where I think it gets really fucking weird. I wouldn't be surprised if creeps were trying to marry 16-year-olds, don't get me wrong. But I think there's something about removing a child from their home and forcing them to marry you and moving them to a different country that just doesn't quite so well in my stomach.
What really gets me is that All of this could have been ended in 2010, but the U.S. Congress failed to pass the International Protecting Girls by Preventing Child Marriage Act. The United States remains only one of 2 nations not to ratify the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Children. Somalia is the only other country that didn't ratify it.
We're not great when it comes to rights.
That's dumbfounding, because usually we fall right in line with the other G8 countries. And what they do, we do. And if we don't set the precedents, then they set the precedents, and we pretty much follow right behind them. But no, out of the 7 countries that said, this is what we're going to do, us and Somalia were the only 2 that did not ratify this pact. I was like, what the fuck?
I'm sure there's some of you who are a little bit more on the conspiracy theory side and might understand what I'm going to say here. But we in the United States have an uncomfortable history when it comes to children and adults and relationships.
Yeah.
And while, yes, you're right, we usually do follow along, I would say I'm not surprised that this didn't happen.
Well, this has been on the books since 1979, and it failed in 2010. Mm-hmm. These other countries, they looked at it and said, if child marriage is a problem, then it's our problem. They didn't go, well, if child marriage is a problem, that's for all of you to deal with. We've got other things we're taking care of, like talking about what gloves the First Lady wore at the state dinner, which I'm not joking about. Congress did spend 3.5 hours talking about how beautiful the gloves that the First Lady wore at the state dinner. I was like, what the fuck? We have bigger problems.
No, we don't, though. That's the interesting thing. Like, that's the most interesting part about America, is that we are literally a third world country when it comes to, like, rights with a Gucci belt on, dude. Because we talk about fucking nothing. Like you said, 3 hours. 3 hours they spent talking about this. You know how long it would take to deliberate, honestly, on something like this if it was a voting sort of process? If it was a voting process to end child brides.
Yeah, but it's a voting process in which, can I get reelected with this? Oh, no, I'm still 2 years out, 3 years out. I'm not going to talk about it. I'll talk about it during the election cycle.
Yep, and then do nothing about it.
Yeah, that's why I'm a firm believer in term limits for people in Congress.
Oh, me too. I'm a huge believer in term limits.
How did term limits come about for the presidency? That didn't happen until Roosevelt. And as soon as he died, they put term limits on it because he ran for what, 4 terms?
Yep, 4 terms.
Yeah, they're like, we've had enough of this crazy bullshit.
That's it.
2 terms.
Exactly what happened.
There is a way of having that happen, and it's the second act in one of the articles. It's never been used, but it's where this. Well, no, it takes 2/3 of all the governors of all the states to sign a piece of paper saying, Congress, y'all are fired. You now have term limits, and boom, that's it.
Oh, I thought you meant the elongation of a term. Yeah, no doubt. Of course, they're not going to vote for their own term limits.
It's going to take the state governors
to do it. That's like me saying, hey, John, I'd like for you to give me a term limit as long as we're doing the show. Of course they're not going to fucking vote for it.
Vote themselves out of office?
They're not putting themselves out of jobs. All they need to do is their job, though. Mm-hmm. Yeah, God forbid.
But almost all these debates have agreed that children are deserving of protection, but our country doesn't want to do anything about it.
It's mind-boggling. And it's like, it's not even that much of a difficult protection. It's like, hey, you can't marry this child because it's a fucking child.
Yeah. Now, if we go just a little bit further back in history, child bride, the first time it was actually used, it was back in the 1870s and also in the 1880s. But you also had child wife and boy husband were 2 other very popular phrases. Mm-hmm. It hit the Oxford Dictionary for records in 1843. So, I mean, we're going all the way back to 1843. People saw that this was somewhat of a problem. But you have to kind of put yourself in the headspace of what it was like back then.
Listen, and I mean this wholeheartedly. I understand that back in the day, shit was weird. And, kids were married young. I mean, even if we go as far as back as, like, let's say, quote-unquote, biblical times, we are too far of a society to even remotely think that this is okay.
Even back in ancient Rome, according to the records that they were able to uncover, most people did not get married until their early 20s. We're talking ancient Rome here.
Oh, so even the Romans thought it was bad. And they were perverts.
Oh, hell yeah, they were. But women had no rights back then. Absolutely zero.
Mm-hmm.
They weren't even classified as citizens.
That's scary.
Yeah, the only way that they got citizenship was through their husband. It was really fucked up, but you're still talking their average age was around lower 20s, roughly 20 to 23. Doing my homework, looking for the original topic that I was going to do, which was how dating has changed throughout the ages. And then I came across this. But there's...
Yay.
Yeah. Back in the 17, 18, early 1900s, most people, when they looked at age, it was more about what you were capable of doing. So there were particular ages at which a person would go to school. But if there were no schools, well, guess what? You didn't go to school. You started working. And if you were a person that was large enough or able enough or financially prepared enough, that's when you went to work, you got married, and you started carving out your own life.
Mm-hmm.
But those moments could come at different times for different people. When I was a kid, I'm still not that big of a person, but take somebody in junior high who was playing center for the football team.
Mm-hmm.
If it wasn't for modern day, he would actually be probably in a mine or in a factory or out on a farm, earning his own living and possibly already married. But back then, that was their mode of thinking.
Yeah, it's a little different because, like I said, times are different. And the reason I say this is because it's so obvious to me that, like, people are aware of the situation. It's not like it was back in the day. We don't need you to be a fucking hunter or a gatherer in the most primitive sense of the word. If you want to stay in school, stay in school. It doesn't matter your size. So with that comes an evolution in the way we date, in the way we communicate, and everything. And that's why, to me, it's like, this is common fucking sense.
Yeah, but no records of when people got married were kept in the United States until 1880. And really, when you look at the census, I remember doing a study on prison population, and even those records, very poorly kept. They only went back to around the same time period, around 1880s, when they started keeping records. But there was no specific age on marital status until 1910. And there was another study conducted in 2011 that was published in the American Academy of Pediatrics, which estimates about 9% of women today are getting married before they turn 18. And this is happening in the United States.
That's a lot.
These are American citizens. A lot of them first generation or born here or multi-generational, born in the United States. 9% are being married before they turn 18.
That's insane.
This isn't distant past, people.
Right, we're talking today.
Yeah.
There's a few different sects of certain religions that allow this. And this I know. The problem is some of those religions hold a lot of power. And because they hold that power, they can lobby their way out of bullshit. And we've seen it happen. It's no secret with Warren Jeffs, who had several child brides.
Yeah.
So it comes to a point where we have to, as people, if you're listening to this, you say, what the fuck is wrong with this country? And you start asking questions.
There was even a study done by the CDC, Center for Disease Control, which estimates that the probability of marriage by age 18 in today's United States is around 6% for women and 2% for men.
Mm-hmm.
you look at that and it's a huge disproportion there. But even if we keep going with this, the precise line of when childhood ended and when adult begins, adulthood from childhood is cordoned off with adult rights and responsibilities, becomes very fuzzy towards the end of the 19th century.
Right.
Because chronological age and your mentality age blurs.
Yeah.
Look at people in high school. Some of them are very intelligent, and you would actually mistake them for being adults because of how they think. But then you have this other group, and you look at them and you go, you're a child in an adult
Those
body.
are kids.
Yeah.
And what's scarier is that people will say things along those lines to sort of justify this line of thinking. Like they'll say, well, do you see how they act? They're so mature. They're clearly mature enough to get married. Which, well, yeah, they may seem intelligent. Guess what? They're still fucking kids.
Right. Yeah, and there was, back in like early 19th century or early 20th century, 1902, a child being married, and we're talking as young as 13, 14 years old, it was not really notable. People were just like, whatever. Especially when you start talking about the more rural areas and not the built-up cities.
Yeah.
It was rather common. They didn't really think anything of it. But to think of that happening today, in today's modern society, and we're supposed to be like this great first world whatever, and this is still happening. Kids, 13 years old.
I can't believe it. I can't believe it, but these kids, they're kids.
So now we jump over and start looking at these adults petitioning on behalf of minors.
They need their asses
Now,
whipped.
we're talking 5,000 adults petitioning on behalf of minors. But there's also 3,000 minors seeking to bring their older spouses or their fiancés into the United States. And it's the lure of a U.S. passport
Predatory.
combined with lax U.S. marriage laws that are fueling this. There's no other way of talking about it. We did an investigative show with a very popular YouTuber who fell from grace, still waiting for his prosecution to happen. But he traveled from one state to another state to find a minor and then transport that minor from that state back across the border in order to groom them for marriage. That is
predatory.
Human trafficking.
It's manipulative. It's human trafficking. It absolutely is. And I fully believe that. I don't give a fuck what anyone says. If you are an American citizen, because I'm not going to sit here and comment on other countries' cultures. I'm not from there. I don't care what they believe. And I do care to a certain degree, but I can't speak on it. But I can tell you this. If you're an American citizen and you go to a different country to find a child to marry, you're not only a pedophile, you're trafficking children.
Under the guise that it's, quote unquote, legal. There is a difference between what is legal and what is moral. Legal and moral,
Hello.
they're supposed to be parallel. It's legal, but it's still immoral to do. That's what pisses me off.
Me too.
We're supposed to be a country that has this, we're moral, we have moral standards, we don't do this, this is something that we frown upon. And as we said in Tuesday's show, we prosecute pedophiles to the fullest extent. These people, most of them will never again see the light of day. They will forever be dressed in a funky ass, weird colored uniform.
Good.
Every facet of their life is controlled by somebody else. They've lost their freedom. They gave up that right when they decided to mess around with a child. But we have this loophole that people are able to exploit, and people remain silent. And if they're not remaining silent, then they're told to shut up and sit down and do your job.
It gets to a point where they used to say silence is you being complicit. And in this case, that's not true. Because even when you speak about it, you're told, like you said, to shut up. People are saying it's not technically illegal. And I said this Tuesday, if you do not find anything wrong with going to a different fucking country and finding a minor and forcing them to marry you, you are not welcome here. You have no business listening to this show.
Where are the people in the State Department that looked at this and saw these petitions coming across their desk and going, wait a minute, there's something wrong with this? Where are those people?
Why does no one care about these kids?
Well, I'm thinking, if I worked for USCIS and I'm the one that approves or disapproves these immigrations, either a visa or a green card or whatever it is, and I'm sitting there, I'm looking at this, I'm going, okay, this person married this person, they're an American citizen, they are not, so they want to bring their bride or their groom to the United States. Okay, no problem. Oh, wait a minute, they're 15 years old. Where's my supervisor? There were over 5,000 approvals seeking to bring minor spouses or fiancés into the United States. And almost 3,000 of those were by minors looking to bring their older spouses. What the hell?
Sick. And it's sick and it's depraved, dude. Like, it's fucking weird. And it's weird to me because I've worked with adults trying to get citizenship. It's not fucking easy. They have to do the meetings. You have to meet with the immigration officer. Why is no one asking these kids, are you safe? And you should be able, as an immigration officer, to tell if this kid is fucking safe or not. This goes beyond the concept of immigration and legal status. Fuck all that. This is about a child's safety.
Yeah. Now, when you look at the age group of these adults, you would think that most of these were adult men well over 40. Nope, not true. Out of those almost 6,000 petitions, only 149 were older than 40. Out of that, only 28 were over 50. There was only one who was over 70 for a 17-year-old wife from Guatemala.
Over 7? That's unacceptable.
Yeah.
It's unacceptable. I don't care what anyone says. It's fucking disgusting. That's literally disgusting. And it needs to be stopped.
Yep.
And someone needs to have the balls in the state's office to be like, no.
I would say, where do they want to live in the country? Let's say Nevada. Nevada's a pretty liberal state. Allowed gambling, prostitution is allowed in some areas. There's other laws that Nevada has that no other state has.
Sure, you're going to live right next to the police station.
So this person, they got approved by the federal government, but they want to live in Nevada. Well, Nevada sits there and goes, wait a minute, that's not going to work in our state. You go find someplace else. Let's kick in some state rights here.
Hello? You can't live here. You can't fucking live here.
Yeah.
You cannot fucking live here. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm not fucking sorry.
Your wife is how old? 15? No, not going to work in our state. Generally, states have the age set as 18 for the minimum age of marriage, or quote unquote legal age of consent. And yet every state has exceptions. Some states like New York, Virginia, Maryland, 16, 17 years old. But those three states specifically allow children under the age of 16 to marry with court permission, meaning they have to go in front of a judge and convince the judge, this is what I want to do. I know what I'm doing. And you know what happens? The judge says,
a stupid judge.
Okay.
To call the judge very fucking stupid, in my mind. You have to be a special kind of idiot.
It's crazy.
It's alarming that people are approving this and no one's stopping and thinking, okay, sure, it's legal in their country, but here's our country and here's where our standards are. You don't get to marry a child.
I've talked with women and men who they got married when they were 18. And now they're in their mid-20s, almost 30. And you talk to them about what it was like for them. Most of them, they're like, I had a very good time. However, they regret the decision because they look back and all of their friends went to college, they went to concerts, they went to parties. They were able to do all of this stuff, but they could not do that because they had marital responsibilities. They had a house, they had a car, they had bills, they had all this stuff that comes with being married that being single, young, and in your 20s, you don't have to worry about. Those worries and those pressures are not there.
Yeah.
They're like, damn,
That's very true.
I wish I waited. And if you look at when people are getting married nowadays, most men, most women, they're waiting longer and longer. A lot of marriages nowadays are happening in their late 20s, early 30s. Some, they're waiting until their mid-30s before they get married.
Oh, yeah. I'm in my late 20s, and I don't think I'm getting married anytime soon.
And I looked at the statistics, part of that original thing that I was looking at, and there was a track of all the census records and everything from 1880 forward, all the way up into today, beginning of 2021, and it shows the average age of first marriage. And from 1980 forward, it just keeps going up and up and up. And you're looking at late 20s, early 30s, mid 30s. And they even broke it down by occupation and how much money people have. They broke this thing down every possible way. And it didn't matter. The age for first marriages goes up. But yet you have these people who are finding a loophole and going to another country to marry a child and bring them to the United States. Fucking insane.
Just perving out.
Yeah.
Just perving out. Like, what kind of shit is that? And finding that loophole is even weirder. Like, the fact that we know this loophole,
Yeah,
if someone
it
said,
exists.
oh, right, the Child Protection Act, I'd be like, what the fuck is wrong with you? Like, we cannot talk. Because I never thought in my right mind, in my God-given left-brained mind, that some fucking creep would go to another country and traffic a child and say, well, technically, Your Honor, I didn't do anything wrong.
Yeah, we're talking 13. Age 13. So I'm looking at the data right now. It's sitting right here in front of me. When I combine the I-30 and the I-29 Fs, which is I-30 is for your spouse, I-129F is fiance. I'm looking at over 10,000 petitions. Those that were approved,
That's sick.
almost 9,000. Wait, we're looking at 10,000, 9,000.
It's alarming.
This is fucking insane. 14, 15, 16. Only 2.6%
What really upsets me, because
were rejected.
I'm just so, yeah, that's fucked up. And there's not a single person with any fucking balls in the government to say, you know what? Hey, let's put everything on pause real quick and vote for this. It could take 10 fucking minutes for us to stop this shit. And instead of doing that, they would rather focus on everything else.
They had a chance in 2010 to end this thing. And why it did not pass with 100% unanimous vote on both sides of Congress, the House and the Senate, how it did not get 100% backing is beyond me.
And you know
We're
what?
talking about
Another problem is they write bills, and they'll write bills that are completely non-tangential. And it's things that they know people aren't going to vote for. So they'll put like 3 different things in a bill that are fucking dumb. And then the one important thing gets completely overridden.
Yeah, but we can write a single bill and go to war for over a decade, and it's the only bill, and it gets unanimous vote with maybe 3 holdouts. They can do that in like a day, but something that actually protects children from child marriage and being able to use U.S. citizenship as a loophole for perverts and pedophiles and whatever else we want to call them, they can't do that. We're supposed to be protecting children.
Kids.
Oh, no. But we can put cops in schools. We can force kids to wear uniforms and put them in little prisons.
Absolutely. We can literally arrest children who talk back to their teachers or get into a fight in the locker room. But when it comes to a child being trafficked, literally, and that is what we're calling it.
Yeah.
You cannot tell me it is anything different.
It's nothing but trafficking. Well, like I said in Tuesday's show, there was a documentary that I watched, and then I went out and I started researching this firm and researching the laws that were set up and put in place with U.S. citizens traveling to other countries to literally have sex with underage kids. They get caught by that country's law enforcement agency. Our law enforcement agency is sitting right there with them. They prosecute them under that country's laws, and then they extradite them to the United States expeditiously. This is an expeditious extradition. And then they are tried and convicted in U.S. courts under U.S. law. But we can't stop this.
No, God forbid.
Because they are married, and the marriage is legal in that country.
That is what makes me so annoyed when we talk about America and we stand out. We're one of the richest, wealthiest countries. When we have laws like this, it completely just eliminates any sort of strength and power we have, because the simplest thing, protecting children. And you know what? I'm not even for not getting these kids over here. If a fucking freak is trafficking children and they bring them over here, you're going the fuck to jail. We're going to do something to help the kid.
We'll meet you at the airport.
Absolutely, we will.
We'll leave a light on for you.
Yes, exactly. As soon as you get there, we will have a sign with your fucking name on it.
When this whole thing came out, questions were raised and a quote-unquote discussion happened within the agency on what it can do to prevent forced minor marriages. Well, the marriages are happening in another country. Now,
we shouldn't recognize it.
Yeah, well, the United States is already in a shithole because every time we turn around, we're sticking our nose in business of other countries, and we have no business messing with them. But we're always right. Yeah, right, okay. Every time we stick our nose where it doesn't belong, shit gets fucked up.
Yeah, we're not great at minding our business.
No, I've gone all the way back to World War I on this thing, and every single time we've stuck our nose into something, it blew up. That's a whole different topic, different discussion. But officials wanted to create a flagging system that requires verification of the birth date. I said we had the most frequent countries. Here's the most frequent countries: Mexico, Pakistan, Jordan, Dominican Republic, Yemen, and Middle East nationals had the highest percentage of overall approval petitions. Some of these countries do not have the best record keeping. Some of them, we really don't have that great of international relations with those countries. So, yeah, our State Department can say, look, we received this petition. Can you verify this minor? Yeah, we're not talking to you. But we kind of need this. Yeah, we're not talking to you. Okay, well, I guess we have to take their word
so
for
then
it.
that kid's not going to be approved.
No, they actually approve them. It's
Which
just unverified.
Yeah, I get that. To me, common sense would dictate if they're not talking to you, you should probably say, this is wrong.
It just makes me so frustrated and angry. We have these groups that will, on their own dime, go to other countries to rescue kids who were kidnapped, and they're being sold into child trafficking and sex labor and all this other stuff. But they, on their own dime, without any support whatsoever, fly over to other countries and rescue these kids. We had this whole big blow up.
Risking their lives.
And then they turn around and they help that country prosecute those groups. And then we had this whole huge blow up with China kidnapping kids and then putting them through adoption agencies to have them adopted into the United States. And that whole thing blew up all over the place.
It's nuts.
But we can't stop this. We can stop child trafficking happening from China into the United States and kids getting kidnapped and sold into prostitution and different types of slavery. But we have a hard time stopping this.
But child brides?
Perfectly fine. You get a stamp of approval via the United States State Department and Immigration Services.
Thanks for coming. Here's your reward. You get to keep a fucking child.
Yeah, here's your stamp of approval, you unprosecuted pedophile.
Right. You don't even get to go on a list or anything. Like, you should be on a list, I would say.
Nope. Now, if you're 18 and in high school and you're going out with a 16-year-old, you might, I don't know, hopefully she's not 15, because you fall just outside that Romeo and Juliet law.
Right.
Labeled for the rest of your life.
It's a sad world we live in.
We're talking about people that are going and marrying 13, 14, 15-year-old girls in other countries. And because it's legal in that country, the United States recognizes it and allows it.
That shit blows my mind.
They can come over here. They can live in any state that they want. And yeah, the next door neighbors can see this. They can see this 30, 40, 50, 70-year-old man kissing up on a 17-year-old or 15-year-old or 13-year-old, 14-year-old. They can report them. The cops can come out. All they have to do is grab that document from the State Department saying, we are legally married and it is recognized by the federal government, and the cops can't do a damn thing about it.
That's fucking weird. Like, that is weird to me.
Because no law is technically broken.
And if you feel like that, honestly, if you feel like you need to go somewhere and, like, kidnap a child, basically, just don't.
What is normally said is that child marriage is via parental consent. However, it can or may involve coercion, or they will force the girl to marry against her will. And it's in another country. How are we supposed to investigate that? We can send a contingency over there and they can try to investigate, but they can only do that if the other country allows it. Most of the time, because of international relations with other countries, especially today, that's not going to happen. It's going to be like, our country, get the fuck out of here. We'll investigate it if we want to.
Hello. Yeah, exactly. We should make sure the kid's safe and then just deport that person. Get the fuck out. You're not welcome here anymore. Your citizenship has been revoked. Fucking pervert.
Yeah, there's this whole thing, it just keeps on going. If you want to look it up, it's very simple to do. All you have to do is bring it up on Google, look at child marriage, and you will come up with hundreds of research documents, government documents. A lot of them are PDFs, websites, and other stories that you can follow, and you can go down this rabbit hole that is never ending. Really, we just scratched the surface of this.
Yeah, and it's gross. And if you learn more and you want to share it with us, feel free.
Yeah, go right ahead. There was a New York Times op-ed entitled America's Child Marriage Problem. They were documenting thousands of girls and a handful of boys who were married in the 21st century, thanks to the exceptions of state marriage laws that allow judges to consent to those marriages, as well as parents who force and coerce their children. I mean, we are talking about American citizens being forced into marriages and it being approved by elected judges. And those judges were not voted out of office.
Nuts.
If it's a child problem, it is our problem. That's how I look at it.
It absolutely is. And I agree wholeheartedly.
That's one heck of a show. And my brain actually hurts. Yeah. And I think I need to go take some Pepto-Bismol to settle my stomach down.
I literally have an outing to go to tonight. And I don't really like going.
I was thinking our next show, we'll do the history of dating, how it's evolved. That's much more lighter than this.
Yeah, maybe.
But this is something that I thought needed to be brought to people's attention. So with that, we will talk to you on the next one.
That's all for this episode of the Girls Ask Guys show, where all of us learn to master this thing called life together. For more answers to your questions on life and love, be sure to subscribe to the show so you don't miss a single episode. And head to girlsaskguyshow.com to submit your questions for a future episode or apply to be a guest on the show. Good luck out there, and we'll catch you next time, right here on the Girls Ask Guys show.